So let me ask you a question. If you and your team put in an AI system that makes a freelance decision on your behalf, who is actually responsible? And sure, your mind goes to the big fat fail, the fall on your face failure. But before we go doom and gloom, and I promise we will get there, let's pretend for a minute that the decision was actually a runaway hit, a success. The decision that the AI made on your behalf was amazing. Who gets the credit? It's not who signed the contract with the vendor. No. Probably not who approved the pilot. No. The vendor? No. The practitioners that created the data that the AI trained on? Who? Who owns the consequence when the system acts at scale across channels and at machine speed? Before, by the way, anybody notices. Yeah, let's talk about that. So Agentic AI is starting to make real inroads and become an actual thing in our enterprise. And honestly, I see a lot of projects right now just doing what we marketers do best, which is throw a ton of spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Only this time it's throw a bunch of AI against the wall and see which one makes a smart decision. If we only had that same level of patience with our young marketing practitioners, but I digress. Anyway, let's take a minute to learn one thing about agentic AI and marketing is this. AI doesn't introduce a technology problem. It probably exposes an authority problem you already had. So in the part 2 last week of this 3-part series on agentic AI and marketing, I argued that one of the loudest debates in AI marketing right now is mostly semantic. We spend an astonishing amount of time arguing, is this really agentic AI? Which is a little like arguing whether a self-driving car is truly autonomous while it's already doing 60 on the freeway and we're in the driver's seat. No, the better question is simpler but much more contentious, and it's what value does this use case create and what authority are we handing over to get it? That's why I introduced last week the AI use case quadrant to help teams distinguish between hiring a helpful co-pilot and tossing the keys to a robot and hoping for the best. But okay. Now, once we've chosen the use case, we hit an even harder decision. How much authority are we willing to delegate? And here's the rule most teams skip in any authority discussion, by the way, much less one that's been delegated to AI. You see, autonomy, the ability to decide and act, it must be earned, not granted. For most of human history, the hardest leadership decisions weren't about tools, they were about authority. Who gets to speak with legitimacy? Who is trusted to decide? Who is allowed to act without asking permission? Those questions shape outcomes far more than any technology ever has. Political philosopher Hannah Arendt warned us 70 years ago that systems designed to run themselves don't eliminate responsibility, they simply obscure it. In other words, when we don't make those explicit, conscious decisions about who and authority is embedded inside mechanisms or processes instead of owned by people, accountability fractures into pieces so small, nobody can quite grab hold of them. And history agrees with her here. You can see this happen across every major expansion of human capability. Innovation always forces a renegotiation of authority. For example, the innovation of writing centralized authority. Why? Because only a few could do it and only a few had access to it. Then the printing press, mass distribution, destabilized authority because why? It democratized access to that writing. And then electricity reorganized it even further because, authority would once again be creating haves and have-nots, so authority was reorganized. Different technologies, different disruptions, different innovations, same uncomfortable conversation. Who is now empowered to decide? Agentic AI responds to that conversation in marketing, and it does so whether we are ready or not. So the important thing for us to do practically when we decide to get into use cases with agentic AI is to stop arguing about definitions and start mapping the evolution of authority with agentic AI. That's right, mapping authority. So long before software could ever act on our behalf, sociologists were already worried about this very idea. Max Weber warned that authority doesn't disappear when it becomes embedded into systems, it becomes mechanized. Decisions get faster, repeatable, predictable, impersonal, which, honestly, to be fair in marketing, is kind of what we're looking for, right? It's kind of the point. We love to tell ourselves in businesses that modern marketing is data-driven. Really? Really is it? I mean, I find it's not. Data influenced, maybe, but really, it's really filtered through intuition, incentives, politics, deference to the loudest or most important person in the room, basically the very human emotions that, yeah, may be influenced by data, but not data driven. But interestingly, you see that emotion, that human idea is an authority structure in and of itself. Organizations build implicit authority ladders all the time. We just call them by different names: approval chains, spending limits, escalation paths, signing authority. Here's the problem. They're rarely written down, and in marketing, they're often a big mess. Digital flattened organizations completely. AI is flattening them even further. Authority is now spread. Regions, teams, agencies, platforms, data owners, vendors. Introducing agentic AI doesn't create this chaos. It just simply reveals it, full stop. That's why so many of the early conversations fixate on hallucinations and rogue bots. We need a human in the loop, we say. Well, yes, absolutely. But which human? What loop? Doing what? We've never really needed that authority before, but yeah, we have. We just never decided on who would be responsible and be autonomously active to be able to do that. See, because the real risk isn't that AI will be wrong. It will be wrong. Count on it. Sometimes, often, a few times, it will certainly be wrong. But people are wrong all the time. Teams misjudge, they miss context, overpromise, underdeliver, lie to ourselves about readiness. Being wrong isn't new. Here's the thing. The risk is that agentic AI will act while being wrong instantly, everywhere, and repeatedly before anybody notices, and no one will be able to define who is responsible for that consequence. And that brings us to the authority ladder. So I use a 5-rung authority ladder to make a delegation explicit. Now, this is not a maturity model. It's not a race to the top of full autonomy. No, it's a governance agreement. The goal isn't maximum autonomy. It's the right autonomy for every use case. Think about it this way. Every time you decide to deploy an agentic AI solution, you're deciding whether it should suggest or choose, prepare or execute, act once or operate continuously, or be reviewed before or after. Who is making those decisions? Different use cases sit on different rungs at the same time. Authority is granted per decision, per system, per level of risk. So let's climb. So rung 1, drafting. Now, here the agent proposes, a person decides. This is pure leverage, minimal risk. Drafts analyses, drafts outlines, recommendations. Nothing happens either way unless a human explicitly says yes and here's how. We pretend every output ends with a question mark, right? What do you want to do? Well, the human now has a chance to decide and or act. This is where teams learn how agents think without the consequences. This is quite literally what most people think of when they think of human in the loop. It's the protector of action within a human-empowered authority. But then we get to rung 2, recommend. Well, now the agent evaluates options, ranks trade-offs, explains its reasoning, maybe even persuasively offering a choice of actions to take. A human still chooses, but it is an action to take, and the human will own the outcome. This is where trust is earned and where bad data and hidden biases will finally begin to surface because the choices may not be good. And yet a human is still the decider, the one with authority. Rung 3 gets to execute with approval. Now it gets real. The agent chooses a path, prepares execution across the tools, perhaps even queuing things up for someone who is not close to the process to be the authority or the decider. But we've granted authority for the direction, the action, and all that awaits is for a human to press go. No choices, no deciding whether or not to take the action, is just when to press the button go. This is where governance stops being theoretical. If your existing approval process is vague or slow or buried in insider-only knowledge, this rung is going to expose it immediately. That gets us to rung 4, execute within a sandbox. Now, this is true autonomy, but fenced in. You've granted the agentic AI the authority to decide, to act, and it's got clear rules, hard limits, full logging, rollback capability, but It also assumes that you've built the capabilities for all those things. Clear rules, hard limits, full logging, rollback capability. If your sandbox is basically built on hope and we'll turn it off if it breaks, that's not a sandbox, that's just a liability. And that brings us to rung 5, autonomous with monitoring. The most oversold rung right now in the hyped up world of agentic AI. This is what all of them are talking about. Set it and forget it. Here, a human monitors outcomes, not the actions that will be taken. There are quite simply very few marketing use cases that need this today, and even fewer organizations that are really ready for it. That's not pessimism, that's just discipline. If you're truly going to enable the full process to be decided and managed by an agentic AI bot, but it's not something that someone already has the full processes and decisioning on, in other words, you know who is responsible, then you're ostensibly saying that no human has been empowered to decide this, but we've decided that AI should be granted this power. Yeah, autonomy without maturity isn't innovation. That is just simply negligence. Now, why does any of that matter? Because this ladder prevents the two failure modes that I'm now seeing more and more when it comes to AI in business. The first is what I call the leap. Pressure builds. The bosses are thirsty for it. The demo dazzles. Somebody goes, let's see what it can do. Authority is vague. Spaghetti is thrown. Guardrails are implied. There's no rollback plan. Something breaks. Panic follows. Trust evaporates. And we go right back to the starting block all over again. The second is the stall. Maybe even a little more common. Endless pilots, proofs of concept that never ship, no authority ever granted, so no trust ever built. Eventually, the project just kind of disappears behind a human taking care of it just more slowly. The authority ladder prevents both of those things. It turns autonomy into a designed progression instead of a leap of faith. So here's the bottom line. Once systems can act on your behalf, neither authority nor responsibility vanishes. It's either deliberately designed or it leaks out in ways that no one owns. The point of agentic AI isn't to give machines more power. It's actually an invitation to decide clearly and explicitly how much authority, responsibility you are willing to delegate, where and to who and under what conditions. Because ultimately, autonomy that isn't earned, it creates chaos. And authority that isn't named creates accidents. Perfectly engineered so no one is responsible and everybody is surprised. So do that. Build your authority ladder and know who is responsible for the consequences. It's your story. Delegate it well, and then you'll be able to tell it well. I'll see you next week.